And who of you is older than 30? 35? Nobody. So I'm white, male, European, and 50 plus. So, like in the worst category of the world. So I can't teach you anything. But as Paul asked me, I'll talk a bit why there is a Water Envoy. And I might actually switch presentations knowing what you're doing, but we'll see. And Water Envoy is actually an experiment. So I'm a test by the last cabinet, Rutte II, the ministers Ploemen from Aid and Trade and Minister Schultz from at that time Infrastructure and Environment met each other across the world for different reasons. Minister Schultz in her quest for water management or better water management and development, and Minister Ploemen for the whole in development 2030 agenda. We didn't have a 2030 agenda at that time yet. Inequality, health, production, in food, in clothing, in child labor, and so forth. And every time they met, it was water. And they said, we have only 7 days a week and 24 hours a day, and we have to do so many things in the Netherlands, talk to parliament and parliament and parliament, and then run around the world, and we don't find time for a clear focus on water. And Minister Schultz gave me a call. I was then still working for President Obama's Hurricane Sandy task force in the United States. He said, when are you in the Netherlands? And as it turned out, my father at that time still alive had his birthday in September. I said, well, in September. We got together and they asked me, do you want to become our water envoy? And I had really no clue. I didn't know what the envoy was. And an envoy is a thematic ambassador. So I represent the Netherlands around the world, not in one country, not representing the Netherlands in Burundi or Malawi or Mozambique or Kenya. No, I represent the Netherlands across the world, except for in the Netherlands, on the theme of water in the relationship, of course, with climate change, very important, and other sectors like energy, food, agriculture, transportation, and so forth. And in my role, I have 3 tasks, because there was a reason why they asked me. One, to increase water awareness, the awareness on water insecurity, you could say, the challenges that come with water. And I will talk about it a bit. And for that you have to do a lot, build coalitions between almost everything and everyone across the world, do research because awareness only comes with understanding, is my conviction. So you can shout and say, I need more attention. Well, that sometimes work in a party or in parliament, but after a while it stops. So awareness comes with the understanding. What is it? What is the challenge? Political attention also comes with better understanding. And the second is a lot is going wrong in the world, but we like to prevent that from happening. So we'd like to help the world in moving to more preparedness. So my second task is help when things fall apart, after disasters, floods, droughts, lack of water security, conflict resolutions. But better to prepare, prevent. And the third, and I hope I can even find time for that, but I think I will fail to that task, is I'd like to work on innovative approaches, because I'm a true believer that, and you're the example of that, is that the solutions my generation comes up with, are a total fail. And we invent the world based on what we know and not based on what we don't know. And we should prepare the world for the future based on the challenges of the future, not the understanding of the past. It's a challenge, but we should. So I need your help in Africa and Asia. And now I do travel a bit.
It's an understatement.
This was the understatement of the day. So I might find you, or you might find me. You can always find me online. Easy to connect through LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever. Okay, let's talk about water a bit, yeah? Because we're almost out of time. And we are actually out of time. Look at this. I found this on Twitter this week. Rien Kuiper, who was a good colleague of mine when he was, I think he's still at the Environmental Assessment Agency, our Dutch PBL, and he tweeted this image. And I'll translate for the ones of you who don't read Dutch. It says, German, a course in school that has to be obligatory. That obligatory German in school seems the least challenging task for the Dutch, thinking of climate change. And you might recognize the Netherlands. Well, not, eh? This is the current coastline. And he started to draft this image saying, well, you know, this is where we will end up. Thinking about all the reports that come out in the context of sea level rise, surges, storms, and so forth. And if you read, there's this is like a mega hole in the North Sea because we took all the sand out to protect ourselves massively, but we failed. So he said, let's learn German and move there because there's nothing else to do. We already, and Paul knows this very well, we already learned German because Paul does this every year, or did this. Ice skating. So we go to Austria because there was a famous tour, the Elf City skating tour. We did how many times? 10, 12?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, not a lot, but it became famous anyway. It's 200 kilometers. Yeah. 200 kilometers ice skating in a day, not a week. And he can do this. He's a famous ice skater. And because we don't have ice and winter anymore, you know, we skipped the winter this year totally. We moved from autumn to more autumn and then spring all of a sudden, as you can feel. It was a very autumny winter. So we can't skate. So Paul every year travels to Austria and he knows German, so he doesn't have to learn it anymore. But is that our future? Now, what does that have to do with water? I will tell you a bit. This is a picture taken by Apollo 17. Very famous image, 1972, so old, but this was the first real snapshot of planet Earth. So one picture of the planet in full, and it went back from orbit to the planet and created a buzz. The environmental movement embraced this image. Why? Well, for one reason, it showed the planet in all its beauty. It's amazing. It was also a beautiful picture, but it showed the planet also in its beauty and vulnerability. This was like facts by camera. We could see there was no planet B. There was only one, not a single other hidden behind it. So it showed the beauty and the vulnerability. And they took that message of beauty and vulnerability and that we better care for that planet as an image to take forward. But they did something else and we called it, the world called it the blue marble. And there's a reason for that, because 71% of the surface of the planet is water. And we always like to think that water is blue, which of course is not true, but that's okay as a way to reference. It's okay to say water is blue. So the blue marble, 71% of the planet is water. And that is a false image, because it gives you the feeling that there is enough water for all. Enough water for people, for animals, for plants, for biotic systems, and so forth. So what I do now is I take a huge vacuum cleaner and I take all the water away. So now you have to imagine, close your eyes and think of a planet without water. What kind of form it will be if you take all the water away. Well, I'll help you a bit. It's still a sphere. Nothing really happened, right? And it's like, because the water is like carpet or paint on the wall. You put a lot of paint on the wall and you still, still have a wall. It doesn't really change in form. Because it's only on the surface. It's not really putting a dent in the planet, all that water. And if I take out all the water with this huge water vacuum cleaner and I put it in a sphere, that's all there is. This is all the water coming from our lakes, our oceans, our seas, our rivers, our aquifers, the water in the soil. That's it. Salt, brackish, sweet, fresh, dirty water. And then if I only look at the fresh water, the water coming from fresh liquid water in the ground lakes and swamps and rivers, it's that one. The size of Kentucky or the Netherlands, you can choose depending on what your reference is. But if we then look the water we can use for human consumption, agriculture, food production, energy, so the water that is good for us, there is a third sphere, that's that very small dot there. It's 0.4% of the world's water we can use. So while there is not an abundance of water, there's actually a scarcity of water. While you think there is a lot of water, there actually isn't a lot. So you better be careful with that water. And I can tell you, we are not careful with water. That's why I need your help. Now, second is climate change. You've been reading, perhaps marching the streets, I wish you would, to call on politicians and people, 50 plus white male Europeans, to change behavior and think about climate change differently, because we have to act on climate change. And I know this for a while, and I try to behave. At the same time, I got this wake-up call again when David Carson, who heads the climate program for the WMO. The WMO is the World Meteorological Organization. It's like the KNMI of the UN. The Weather Institute for the UN, you could say. And every year they present a report, a State of the Climate report. And in 2017, when he presented the 2016 State of the Climate report, he said something that shocked me. And every time something shocks me, I hope it shocks the world, but it doesn't. So, but he shocked me because the WMO is like this trustworthy organization, right? There's all these researchers behind their computers in their data centers, working with everyone in the world, figuring out the facts and thinking about the future and saying, this is what the future will look like. And what comes out of them, you read and you say, oh, that's right. So trustworthy, building trust by facts, research and understanding. So what they say is true. When I was a little boy, I always thought they were wearing white coats, men and women, in a laboratory, KNMI, figuring out the climate for real. So you trust them. And then David Carson presents the report and says, we don't know. So the people you trust perhaps most when it comes to climate says, it's so massive, unpredictable, and challenging. We don't know. We are in truly uncharted territory. So thinking of climate change by facts, the future is uncharted, off the charts. And that means it's bigger than life. It's bigger than we thought. It's too big to grasp, too hot to handle. And alas, he's right. 2018 showed it again. Oh, yeah. And the new state of which is coming out in March, will tell you that he is right. But 2018 was right, right? We saw a lot of those climate-related disasters. The Philippines with the typhoon, the droughts in Africa with day zero, floods in Japan, right after the floods, the biggest heat wave in Japan, and wildfires in California. And I could go on and on and on in all the places where you come from, where you live, where you work. And in the Netherlands, we had a crazy year too. This wet place of the Netherlands had a dry summer, not the driest, but the second driest summer for a long period. So no water. And crazy enough, the eastern part of the Netherlands now has a water deficit. Even with this autumny winter, we have a water deficit. So that means that the natural recovery of that water deficit caused by the drought in the summer did not work. So we passed a tipping point in the east. But that dry summer came after a wet winter with massive storms. It was the first time in our history that we had to close all storm surge barriers, all national storm surge barriers at once because of the storm. So extremes in the context of climate change become more extreme. And water is at the heart of climate change. 90% of all disasters are water related, 90. So that's almost all natural disasters have something to do with water, too much, too little, polluted. And affecting 40% of the world's population. That's 20% over a little over 2 billion people in the next decades, because of too much water, floods, rain events. And 20%, a little over 2 billion, because of not enough water, droughts, scarcity, water insecurity. Already, these years, the years we are living now, the years of living dangerously, you could say, 15% of our economies are impacted by these water crises. 15%. You could think that that should be a wake-up call. If our economies are hit, but there's, bless you, there's a redundancy in our economies because we don't wake up. And half of our aquifers, so the aquifer is the water in our soil, in the ground, could be these large water storage tanks, you could almost say them. Half of the aquifers are past the tipping point. Now, I always find that a very abstract way of talking about water, past the tipping point. But if you think about what it means, it's scary. Because past the tipping point actually means that we've taken out so much water, we, mankind, often men, have taken out so much water out of the aquifers that the natural recovery by rain and rain-fed and groundwater feed in is impossible. So the recovery, so that means that the state of the water of the aquifers is going down. And no flood, rain, or whatever massive event is changing that. So we actually depleted the aquifers, 50% of them at least, thus far that they can't recover anymore. So it means that water volume is going down because we continue to deplete. Past the tipping point is, in this context, not okay. And it's too much water here in Kirabach. A friend of mine, Kadir van Lohuizen, who chases climate change impacts with his camera over the world, was here in Kirabach, one of those small island and development states. The House of the Woman now already is gone because of sea level rise, surges and storms. But also because there's not enough. And then water becomes a reason for competition. And competition for life often is called conflict or war. Now water is more than physical stuff, also in the Netherlands. Water is connected to so many other things. Without water, it's women and kids that walk the wells for hours every day. And there's a challenge from an equality point of view, and a point of view of opportunity and education, but that's also very economic, because women are far more entrepreneurial than men. And you take actually the opportunity for them to work, to provide progress for their community. If we provide water for these communities, it's the women that help progress their communities forward. And the kids can go to school. So No water means no economic progress and prosperity, means no opportunity for education. And without good sanitation facilities in these schools, it's the girls that are the dropouts every month because they have their period. And that means that without water and sanitation, there's increased inequality and a lack of opportunity. But the water they drink is also unsafe. More than 2 billion people in the world drink contaminated water, or water of not the right quality. And that means that when little babies drink that contaminated water, they get brain damage. And there is no pill in life against brain damage. And that means that they are, when it comes to progress, lost forever. So water is a matter of health and security, but also for progress and equality and opportunity and emancipation and education. So water is not a dam, a dike or a levee or a gray or green infrastructure. No, it's a human right and an opportunity for all. And it means that there are connections between the Sustainable Development Goals, as you all know. There's a Sustainable Development Goal on water, 6, with all the other goals. It is, of course, about climate change and infrastructure and urbanization and biodiversity and the lack and loss of that. It's about our oceans and our aquatic systems. It's about consumption, food, agriculture, energy. It's for security and safety and health and equality and emancipation and education. Wow! And that is why there's a water envoy. To help you understand that these interdependencies matter. Because if we understand these interdependencies, then the Minister of Finance, Agriculture, Education, Food, and so forth start to understand the importance of water. Because nowadays it's water people talking to water people. And that's very boring. Because water people, they're amazing people, but if they continue to talk to each other, the world will still fall apart. And that's the challenging part. If water people do their best, the reward for their success falls in the buckets of others. In the ones that work in education and health and equality and climate action and security. But if they fail, if these crazy water people fail, then all of a sudden there's a lack of education, opportunities, economic development, health costs go up, insecurity rises, conflict, migration, and so forth. So we have to make these connections. So you are ambassadors for making these connections. And the high-level panel on water I helped start as an envoy, raising awareness, my first task and understanding. We created a panel of 11 heads of states, so that our presidents and prime ministers, sitting heads of states, responsible now. The Secretary General of the UN and the President of the World Bank. And together, we advised the world. I was their advisor, a Sherpa, you call it. Let's not get into that. That's a too long story. But the 3 main conclusions coming out of the high-level panel on water were: 1, we have to understand water in its full complexity. All these connections. 2nd, if that understanding really makes sense, then we have to value water better. And not look at the economic and financial, what does a water drop cost? Or what does water infrastructure cost? No, the values for our society, for environment, our culture, social issues, and economic issues. So it's the full scale of these values that matter. And taking them into account helps us to water action. And 3rd, thanks to that understanding and the way to comprehensively value water, we can start to manage it far better, inclusively and with impact. And it means that we have to manage it with including all, leaving no one behind, the motto of the UN, but also at all scales. Household and community scale, city and river basin, national, but also international, transboundary, where water often causes a problem with dams or obstructions, the lack of water or pollution. Downstream nations and communities are impacted. Looking at the time. You will tell me, when to stop. So we have to understand water better. And water in the connection to climate change, and I will show you some slides that come out of a research I initiated when I started to become an envoy. I said, I have to get my head around this better. Because who am I? We need to understand it. And understanding comes with connecting the dots. And I asked a group of friends, partnering organizations, and I started with the Environmental Assessment Agency in the Netherlands, Willem Lichtvoet, project lead on water. We created a team of organizations from the Netherlands and around the world, and we said, okay, let's map these water challenges in their connections. The geography of future water challenges. You can download it online. It's a PDF, so it's free, and we're working on a website that is more interactive and will get you access to the data behind. But it looks at the world, so not at the Netherlands. It looks at the world in the connection of water and climate and migration and food and energy production and so forth. And since you come from different sectors, I pulled out some of the report slides to talk a little bit about these interdependencies. But one is climate change. Yeah? Climate change's impacts are increasing. So one of the conclusions from the report is that because of these extremes become more extreme, these extremes also become more extreme in already extreme places. So wet places become wetter and dry places drier. So you have more droughts and impact of those droughts in the places that are already dry. So drylands dry up. And on our coastal and riverine regions of the world, the wetness of them becomes wetter. So the vulnerability because of climate change also increases. And there's a geography, the geography, we want to map it and show what it means on a place-based, so that you can understand. Data only matters when it hits you, in the best or the worst way, you could say.
Maybe Henk, sorry to interrupt, so we will give you a copy or a link to the presentation, it's good to know, and we will also make links to the references you make to those publications.
And we might even get you the book,
yeah,
because I ordered more copies, so my staff can help, perhaps with 10 of you we can share. And the impact of floods around the world is crazy. It's like almost a democratic thing, a flood. Every country a flood or more. But if you look at the impact of those floods on people, all of a sudden you feel there's no democracy at all. The rest of the world's not so impacted. It's Asia and Southeast Asia that are hit worse. So it's the vulnerability that matters when the water comes. If you're prepared, you can survive. If not, you will die. And the same goes with the droughts. There's a concentration of that impact on humankind. And those droughts cause people to run, and those floods too. And there's a challenge here, and because the numbers are contested by the researchers, because what is migration? Is it moving from one place to a different continent? Or is already migration movement in your region and going back and forth? Or do we call that a move? But at least the UN says that 25 million people are on the run because of climate change impact right now. And they estimate this number to tenfold. Some research say 250 million is never proven, no, until it's proven, which is true. But suppose it happens, then 10% of the African continent will be on the run. In the context of the Netherlands, that means 1.7 Dutch people on the run. Now, we want that, but we also don't want the 250 million. And it's also a world where we urbanize. We move to our cities because this is where prosperity lies, where opportunities are, where people can connect. But challenges also connect. Cities become flood risk hotspots. And there's an economic, financial aspect to that. Professor Stefan Hallegatte, World Bank's economist, OECD lead economist, did a research in 2013, and 2013, not with the last IPCC results, but at the then understanding and data, did a research of all cities in the world in the context of the vulnerability when you think about assets, so the investments in those cities. And he started to list them. And the result of this research is shown here by the National Geographic and said South and Southeast Asia is a risky region, the east coast of the United States is a risky region, and the Netherlands is a risky region. It's a little weird, So you have Miami topping the list, $278 billion at risk. Then comes Guangzhou and New York and New Orleans and Hong Kong and so forth. And you'll find Amsterdam on 96, but I looked in the research because I know Stefan very well in his group. And I thought, why are there two circles around Amsterdam? Huh? It's a little, that important. No, it's because Rotterdam is number 12 on the list, and what's in between was not even calculated. So the Netherlands is number 3 or 4 in the list of risky places when we think about assets at risk. We never imagined that. We don't want to be on this list. We want to be on other lists. But we are. But then we say we have a plan, and we do. There's something other that is challenging on this map. And that's Africa. This is a map that shows the conditions and situations in 2050. There are no big red circles in Africa. And that is a little crazy because at that time Africa almost doubled in size of population. So there's a lot of you there. And that means that if you only look at finance, assets at risk, you only look at the wealth of the world from an economic perspective, the vulnerable and less wealthy, of course, lose out. And that is a challenge for the world because often we only change when we are hit in our wallets, right? If money is involved. But if there's no money involved, how can we move the world to action? We have to think about this more comprehensively than only financially. Because otherwise, it's not only the poor and the vulnerable, no, it's the less asset risks that matter too. We all matter. We can leave no one behind. So this can never be a game-changing moment because we lost or are going to lose money. We have to take care of it. And that inequality you find in our cities. It's poor and vulnerable people that live in vulnerable communities, in vulnerable places, and that vulnerability only increases. Extremes become more extreme in extreme places for the already extreme vulnerable. So social inclusion and equity and equality and leaving no one behind in the approach and in the solution is critically important if we want to think about climate action. This is not about dams, levees, or dikes. This is about people. Yeah? It's a planet of people, a people's planet, and we have to take care. Now, water stress by 2050 is increasing. Dry lands become drier, wetlands become wetter, and that increasing water availability also causes competition, and competition might cause conflicts or challenges. Now look a bit in, this is all from the report, the Geography of Future Water Challenges, and I really have to speed up now. Water and food production, there's water consumption. Now, you see the blue is agriculture. So you could say, it's not to blame, but there's at least an opportunity for change, right? If 80% of the world's water consumption is done by agriculture, and we can make that a little less, that would already help us save. So there's an increase on water consumption. But it's not only agriculture that matters. It's also crops in agriculture that are not for food, but are for energy, that compete with the land available and the water available. So it's competition over land and competition over water in the context of our needs and our increasing needs. There's a low crop yields require water management. These low crop yields increase too because of climate change. And there's a gap in crop yields, rain-fed agriculture. Well, you see, all the gold in the world is not so gold. It's challenging and becoming more contested. And this is by rain-fed agriculture, and this is by irrigated agriculture. And it's increasing. So we have to reconcile in a way. And there's a change in crop production. Why? Well, because there's more food demand. More people, more income. So more people like this, more income like this, more food demand. If we don't become more sustainable in the way we consume, the way we live. Those demands are off-charting the availability we have. Now, water abstraction from agriculture by 2050, South and Southeast Asia running up, developed countries still running up, North Africa and the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa. So you see, we have to go to a different balance. Second is energy. And not for nothing you see this huge dam behind me. We are building dams by the dozens, by the thousands actually. Bigger dams as well as a lot of small ones. And for hydropower, which is great for, you know, cutting down on our CO2 emissions, but oh, help. These dams actually destroy our river systems around the world. Because a dam and a river is a machine, eh? It's a machine of water and sediment. And that sediment, that soil and everything that's with it, moves to the delta when it enters on the coast and helps to strengthen those coastlines. But without sediment, the coast retreats. And on this coast, we build our cities. And because we don't have fresh water supply, we take the water out of the aquifer. And then the cities sink. Jakarta sinks more a year than sea level rise over the last 100 years. Yes, every year, over 20 centimeters, sea level rise over the last 100 years, around 20 centimeters. And cities like Jakarta, the Netherlands is sinking too. So we take the water out, we obstruct our rivers to function, and then sea level rises increases, and salt intrusion from the ocean in our aquifer actually challenges us to actually take more water out upstream, so land goes down, coastlines retreat. The coast of Louisiana retreats with a football field every hour. Every hour, a football field. Think about this, 24 football fields a day, and you can do the math. So, energy production, well, great hydropower. When you think about CO2 reduction, is a challenge when it comes to these rivers. And we did the estimates. And now, this is I always find this a mind-blowing image, not in the right, but in the wrong way. So look at all these circles. This is where we are going to build, next to the smaller dams, almost 4,000 bigger dams. They're on the drawing boards. Finance is being allocated, and they will mess up our riverine system. And if you look at the chart, the gold, the brownish stripe is what is actually possible if you think of it from an environmental point of view. The light blue is what is possible from an economic point of view. And the blue is what is possible from an engineering point of view, because you can always build a dam, right? So we're offshooting our planet with these dams. Technical potential, economic potential, ecological potential. Look at this deficit we're creating. So we have to rethink when you think about renewable energy. And there's a strong increase in energy crop production. And that, as I said, is increasing competition over land, where we flock in our cities, where we need it for food production, but we also need the crop for energy production. And there's this downside. That increases this crop yield gap at 1 and at the same time destroys our rivers. Now, there's our ecosystems too that are challenged by water quality. Our aquatic ecosystems are under pressure. Look at the remaining natural wetlands. And wetlands are great for our ecological systems. Biodiversity and our habitats in our wetlands are amazing, but they go down. But resiliency also for our coast, and the strength of them is also critically important. And the quality of fresh water in our ecosystems, the dark blue is actually okay, so the northern part, you see that all the urbanized part actually are not okay. And these are the losses because of nutrient loading on our coastal systems. So we start doom and gloom today. Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah.
Maybe it's good to give some.
Yeah, I'll give some. Yeah. So I could go on a little bit, but I won't. One thing, the 1.5 report, perhaps you read it. IPCC came out with a report that was presented, and that shows the difference between a 1.5 and a 2 degree warmer world compared to post-industrial levels. It was an ask of the UN, UNFCCC, the climate organization, because in the Paris Agreement we said the world cannot warm up more than 2 degrees, but the ambition was 1.5. And then the question was, what is actually the difference? Is it a lot or not? Well, IPCC was very clear. The difference is massive for everyone and everything. The window of opportunity is small, but we can, if only we change almost everything. And that, coral reefs, for instance, 1.5 and 2 degree, there's no coral reefs or a little of them. So these differences really matter. So moving forward, well, I'll skip the, yeah, well, okay, yeah. So a little bit on this and then I'll get to how we get there. So here we are, and this is our future. And for me, actually, this is your future, of course, yeah? Because I will be gone somewhere, but you will be there. So we, from the past, actually made it impossible there. This is why some people want to go back to the 50s, because they think that is nice. Only 3 challenges, we can handle that. Too many, too hot, too cold, too wet to handle. Let's close our eyes and fall asleep. No, this is the opportunity. This is what you can do, what we can do together. We can actually help develop solutions coming from that. But there's a challenge, and I said that the policies and the way we interact and the way we finance are based on what we know, which is our past and not our future. The Sustainable Development Goals are based on that future, a better future, as is the Paris Agreement. Business as usual is not enough. It will cause more harm than opportunity. So we have to do something different. The world is very non-responsive, and that means that our vulnerability, the gap between our actions and what we need to do is increasing. If we're lucky, we're responsive, but then only in the context of things going wrong and falling apart, disasters. So we respond to past disasters and not prepare for the future. So we better become very proactive. Proactive in the way that we prepare, that we understand that future, but also see it as an opportunity, as a way for change. And that is where water comes in the capacity to connect all these social, economic, cultural, and environmental challenges. And I'll skip this. I plea a bit for a Blue New Deal, a way to approach these challenges in a very opportunistic way, very innovative. I'll share the slides, don't worry. It demands an approach that's systemic. And this is where you all are important, where this cannot be done by one single actor. We have to look at the long term, but we have to do this comprehensively. So connecting the dots between economic, environmental, social, cultural, and so forth issues. Looking at that future comprehensively, those plans can help. But the plan is not enough, although you always have to have a plan. If somebody asks you, what should I do? You always should have a plan ready for politicians. It's very important. You should never say, I don't know. If a politician says, what shall I do? Always say, yes, I know. Then you can still talk to your friends. When you say no, you're out of, the conversation is over. So you need to plan. But it better be comprehensive and at the long term. At the same time, plans don't matter if there are no projects on the ground, if there's no impact. So you need long-term plans and short-term projects. The plan without the project is a book on the shelf, but the project without a plan fails because there is no context of that project. And that means that externalities, external effects become negative. If we only look siloed at our approaches, project-based, then we will lose out. So the plan needs the project as much as the project needs the plan. And those plans and projects can only be developed if we do it together, inclusively, leaving no one behind, by collaboration, cross-sector, cross-interest, cross-scales, cross-business, government, and so forth. And that better be transparent, because transparency builds accountability. It's great for the business case. It's good for your constituency from a political point of view, or your share or stake or stockholders from a business. But transparency also helps us when we make mistakes, and we will make many. Transparency helps us learn, and that learning is critically important for progress and smarter progress. And if we do this right, we will build capacity together, because every step down the road we become more aware, better understanding, more impact, lessons learned. And that capacity is personal and professional, but that capacity is also institutional. Critically important, building up institutional capacity within governments, within NGOs, within businesses and academia. And tying that together is this aspect of understanding, valuing and managing. It's tying it together with planning, design, policy, collaboration. Tying it together to ensure that there is a future, that future is sustainable. Now, we have to work with everyone, but it is also about how you invest in the process. So money is important. Don't think that my plea for people is a plea away for funding. No, we need the money to invest in the project. But the focus of this whole financial conversation in the world is the billions and trillions. And yes, the loss in our cities, the asset loss, $1 trillion a year by 2050, makes us focus on bigger investment. World Bank pledged another 200 billion for climate action. We upped our game in the Green Climate Fund when it comes to the billions and trillions. But I advocate for the millions to spend the billions right. The process of inclusion, of research, of the development of the plan. Because if you do that from the beginning, explore and understand, you maximize opportunities, and those opportunities developed have a higher performance. So if you invest in the process, and it could be projects like here in the Netherlands, Room for the River, investing in all, the maximization of the impact is bigger. And this is happening all over the world. We need the millions to spend the billions right. Now, water is clear and critical for that. That understanding might actually give you the capacity to act, using it as a leverage. And this is a sum up to help safeguard this planet. Thank you.
Big hand, yeah. Thank you very much, Henk. Well, this is a lot of information, a lot of images, but important. So thanks very much. We really appreciate that you would like to take the time. Although we are time constrained, maybe there are some pressing questions for Henk. Feel free to come up, or your feedback, your reflections, because this is a somewhat maybe gloomy picture, but you also give some.
I'm hopeful,
some pathways,
Because of time, I could not talk about all the solutions we're working on. So, yeah.
But willing to reflect a bit, maybe question. Please.
No reflection. I'm just impressed. I'm curious because you travel around the world, advocating for your cause there. How's the general response? Because we read it in the news. I never know because my Facebook feed is all liberal and democratic and that kind of stuff, and I just don't understand why other people don't see the issue. But you must be bumping into this resistance constantly. Can you maybe share a bit of your experiences there as a water ambassador?
Yeah, I think the one that makes it the most challenging is our vested interest. So the world has a lot of vested interests, often money related, and we are afraid to lose some of that. So, I mean, a lot of these facts are not new. Exxon did research in '76, showcasing how fossil fuels actually impacting the climate. And if they want a better future for their children, they better not continue, but that would actually mean less profit. Shell did the same, and the others too. So, Brundtland report from the good side also. So we know this. So why don't we change? Because that is part of your question. It's because change is tough. So what I try to do around the world is to make the big story, which I shared with you, small. What can you do on the scale of a community or even a household? Changing how you treat water and waste, for instance, energy consumption and food production. looking at the city or community scale, how resiliency in the context of climate change can also, adaptation can help you mitigate, building wetlands and caring for green spaces, looking at different ways of energy use can also actually help you better prepare. And that helps because you make it small. And in that smallness is always a business case. There's a business case for sustainable development. The challenge there is, and real estate is here a game changer, I think. Because real estate is often out of pocket. Literally, not loan. The big investors have financial capacity, they don't need investment capacity. And they can build towers by the hour and get the profit tomorrow. But that actually means that profit is not going into a sustainable place. In Miami, for instance, as an example, you can actually make money now knowing that in 30 years the place will be flooded. There is no correlance between your investments now because they are so short-term profit-driven and the return of that investment on the longer term. So these value change, and this is what we do with a lot of businesses and governments around the world, around valuing water, is that we say, but if you take a longer term perspective, you change your business game, you change your scope. We work with Nestle and Heineken and Mars, and so the bigger corporates. We work with the investors world, the banks, the private sector, to help them understand to take these water risks into their mechanisms and look at the longer term. And if you do this comprehensive value approach across the sustainable development goals, that helps the investors. So to your point, does this neutralize the skepticism? No. Does it neutralize the focus on vested interest? No. But it creates opportunities that can actually show that there can be a different way of dealing with it. I'm optimistic, but I'm also challenged a lot. The ignorance also in this part of the world is bigger than we can handle. So that's why I'm always happy to hear from you, from so many voices from around the world, and the things you do or want to do, because I think there lies the opportunity for that change. And if you see how many kids are walking the streets calling for climate action, I was in Belgium yesterday and the day before. There are 3,000 scientists calling on the politics, but there's also thousands of businesses actually calling on the politicians to start to act. And there's elections and it's a small country, but in the context of Europe, those smaller changes are very important. In the context of an election, they call for climate action now. So, of course, we hope, and I think Europe can be a game changer in that too, because on one, we think we figured it all out, but in the context of climate change, we actually did not. If we can help not only ourselves, but also in our collaboration with the rest of the world, help change that frame, that might work. China, of course, is the big, China and India. Their footprint is so massive. If we can help them change the way they actually have their footprint. So this is no easy question, man. Yeah. So no easy answer. Yeah.
May I take over, maybe also given the time? Because I know you can talk for hours, and I really appreciate to see and to feel your passion for these important messages. Maybe I've got two questions actually, maybe for you to conclude, if I may.
Yeah.
So one of them, of course, is after closing this part, we want to have a group picture with you, of course, so let's not forget it. That's the easy one. Yeah. The second one maybe is like in College Tour, we wouldn't let you go before you give a simple advice. What could the Jeppers take with them in the coming 2 years? Most of them will go and work on very concrete projects. What could be the message you would like to give to them, to take on board the change we need?
Well, never forget your passion. The heart is very important to drive action, but never forget to connect it to your mind. Understanding, facts, research. And do this always in collaboration. Find collaborations on the ground. Find capacity in the places where you work. Don't think that professionals can solve these challenges. It's people, only by collaboration. So using your intelligence, but also the intelligence of others, the researchers and report, but also use your passion, your heart, and those of the ones that are challenged or see opportunities, and work by collaboration. And with that, I'm pretty convinced, because it's done everywhere, that you can bridge gaps between interests, easily between skills, if only you continue with that dedication. We can do it in Vietnam, in Bangladesh, India, Myanmar. We can do it in Latin America. I think that would be my advice.
Okay,
Yeah.
a big hand.
And talk about it.
Talk about it.
Ensure that we know, so we can listen and hear and learn. Talk about your successes, but also where things go wrong. Let me know too. I want to hear your stories. Thank you.
Okay, a big hand for Henk. You're almost unstoppable. Sorry, Henk. Yeah.
No, it's good.
But we really appreciate that, because I know you have a very tough agenda, and I really appreciate, to share your passion with this group. This is the one and only Water and Agrofood present.
Very good.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah. Okay, once again.
You.
Yeah.